Classy Mike Trash, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I'm reading for the part of Uncle Dan.
The car parks in the driveway of a quaint cabin surrounded by trees and a nearby river. Gus steps out of the car and surveys the picturesque Montana property. I've missed this place. Gus's Uncle Dan, in his 60s, a middle-aged, stoic lumberjack, exits the driver's side and walks around to meet Gus. Uncle Dan looks him up and down, still not used to his visiting nephew's height. He puts an arm around Gus.
You sure have grown since the last time I saw you, Gus.
Gus chuckles as they make their way down to the cabin together.
Go get settled. I need you up early to learn how I run the wood shop.
Okay, I am tired. Thanks, Uncle Dan. Sunnyside eggs and herbed sausages sizzle in a cast iron. Gus makes his way down the ladder and joins Uncle Dan to eat at their wooden table set for two.
Morning.
Morning. Uncle Dan pours 2 cups of coffee from a tin French press, one for himself and one for Gus. Dan takes a sip of coffee, catches in his beard while slicing coins of sausage. What's today's order for?
A dining set. 2 cherry bentwood chairs left to square things up.
Dan gets up from the table, puts on a Carhartt work jacket before heading out the door. Gus enters the workshop with a coffee refill for his uncle. Next to his cluttered workbench, Uncle Dan drops a stack of untreated wood boards.
Summer job starts now. This isn't your drawings, okay? It's hard labor.
Gus nods and hands Uncle Dan his coffee. A series of moments over their first week as Uncle Dan teaches Gus how to work in his woodshop. A fork dives through a cheesy omelet cooked by Dan. Sounds of coffee pouring into a cup. Uncle Dan finishes pouring his morning brew and takes a slow, satisfying bite of his omelet alone at the table. Gus walks through the kitchen to the front door.
Any plans for your day off?
Gus smiles as he laces up his Nike Blazer high tops. I'm going to go explore more of Livingston. Can I borrow the car?
Don't wreck it.
Uncle Dan tosses Gus his keys and takes a bite of his home fries as Gus heads out the door. Uncle Dan sits alone at the table. Next to a bucket of their saved wood scraps, Gus shows Bridger how to cut off his dried board with the scroll saw and how to sand it down. Gus, feeling confident, guides Bridger's hands on the electric saw. This time we see Bridger smile from the touch. You're doing great. It is so cool that you know how to do all this. All of a sudden the door opens and Uncle Dan walks in. The boys jump apart as if caught in the act. Dan is surprised to see the boys working so late at night and is suspicious.
What are you two doing?
Oh, practicing what you taught me.
But I said not to use the machines without me knowing.
I mean, by this point, I know how to use them. Uncle Dan looks over and sees the buckets of wood scraps and tools the boys are using.
Are you using my wood from my inventory?
No, they're just the scraps. It was my idea.
What was?
Making skateboards.
Skateboards. Gus, I thought we talked...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I wanted a skateboard, but I couldn't afford my own, so I made one from the wood scraps you throw out.
Okay. Why didn't you tell me?
Gus drops his head in a confused shame, unsure why he kept it all a secret. I don't know. Sorry, sir. I made him build me one, too. Uncle Dan looks between both boys, squinting. He's more annoyed than upset. And I think we could sell these to other skaters in town. Uncle Dan crosses his arms, unsure.
No. My shop only sells quality furniture. Gus, I'm disappointed you kept this from me.
But his boards are quality, see? Bridger pulls out Gus's hidden board and shows off his own that they finished last night. Uncle Dan goes from annoyed to intrigued and he looks at the board and reaches to feel it. He looks up at the boys.
You did this yourself, Gus?
Yeah.
Could use some sharper cutting and even more sanding. But you certainly improved. Why do you want to sell more?
Well, it's going to pay for Gus's art school. Uncle Dan's size, and looks at both boys, switching from firm to calm.
Since you already put all this work in, you can keep at it. Just tell me next time you use my wood.
Yes, sir.
And you'll sell them from here in the shop, so you don't get in trouble around town.
Yes, sir.
All right, move over. Let me help you polish this off better.
A series of moments as the boys watch Uncle Dan finish Bridger's board. With 400 grit sandpaper, Uncle Dan goes over the board's edges a few more times. Uncle Dan pours a sealant stain combination on Bridger's painted deck and deftly applies the liquid. It seeps into the wood, and the grain shines and the color pops. With the few quick motions, Uncle Dan removes and transfers Bridger's trucks and wheels into the new board. Damn, now mine's better than Gus's. Gus and Bridger buzz with excitement. Will you help us make more decks to sell to our friends?
Fine, but not today. I am going back to bed. No more secrets, okay?
Gus turns serious and looks to Bridger and nods.
Good. See you boys in the morning.
Uncle Dan places down his tools and walks out of the shop. Bridger rotates his polished board with his hands. Both boys smile with delight. Goes home. Uncle Dan and Gus sit down for a dinner of grilled venison, roasted potatoes, and cheddar creamed corn. As they begin eating, Uncle Dan raises his bottle of beer to Gus.
You did good today, kid. You've earned the weekend off.
Really?
Yeah, we can start the boards Monday.
Sweet.
You fully patched up things with Bridger then?
Gus chuckles. Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad you were able to make a good friend before summer ended.
At the word friend, Gus pauses. He nods slowly, poking a potato. Gus watches Uncle Dan as he slices his venison. Taking a deep breath and leaning forward, Gus feels compelled to open up and share his feelings. Uncle Dan. I've got something to tell you.
I'm all ears.
It's only been a few days, but Bridger and I have become a bit more than friends, and I think I want to be with him.
Then you should. You can go out after dinner. Tell him I said hello.
No, really? Would you be okay with that?
Of course. Bridger's a good kid. Hard worker.
Oh, maybe you're not getting it.
No, I fully understand.
I don't think I just like him. I just like all boys. But him more than others, you know? Uncle Dan is silent for a moment and stares at Gus. Well, say something. Please don't be upset. Uncle Dan takes a deep breath and puts his silverware down.
Gus, I don't know how you thought I would react, but most of life is surprisingly lonely. People are selfish. We all get distracted by work and habits to steal our days, our weeks, our years. Suddenly, you become 50. You realize the life you've built to share with someone special is already half gone.
Uncle Dan sighs and looks to the left at artwork by his wife on the walls.
Or find your special someone and life takes them away too soon.
Uncle Dan looks back at Gus.
So if you ever stumble upon someone who wants to spend their precious few days to love you, let them in.
Gus takes a deep breath of realization that his uncle does know what he's saying. Gus tilts his head as he listens.
I'm not blind. I've seen you two together. Bridger really cares about you, and you care about him. People spend a lifetime trying to find anything like that. Don't let fear keep you from attempting to love and be loved. Or one day you'll regret what you missed and wish you could do it all over again.
Gus watches as Uncle Dan bows his head slightly in sadness. Aunt Megan? Uncle Dan lets his shoulders fall in sadness.
Don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't let the real connection fade away. Embrace it while you have it. Even true love can't last forever.
Thanks, Uncle Dan. Gus leans in and hugs Uncle Dan. Dan squeezes Gus tight and sighs deeply. Uncle Dan must have been lonely for a long time. He pats Gus on the back as they part. Dan grunts and adjusts his shirt, resisting the urge to be emotional.
I don't know why you're sticking around so long. Go tell Bridger I expect to see him with you here in the shop tomorrow morning. I'll make us all breakfast.
Gus laughs and gives Dan a last squeeze on the shoulder and leaves. Uncle Dan sits alone at the table and takes the deepest sighs and sips his beer. He looks to his left and looks to another one of his wife's artwork landscape pieces framed on the wall. Uncle Dan opens the door to Gus's room and immediately spots the trunk. He sighs and slowly steps forward to the trunk and falls to his knees. His eyes go distant as he thinks. Uncle Dan takes his keychain from his back pocket and unlocks the trunk. He lifts the lid. Uncle Dan immediately pouts with grief. With the lid opening, it is revealed that this trunk is where all of Dan's old wife's paintings, sketches, and drawings are stored. Dan lifts a photo of him and his deceased wife. There are many other photos of the couple, happy and in love, in the trunk. Dan picks out some of the bound wooden sketchbooks he made for his wife decades ago. Dan lays the framed photo down slowly. His head falls back as a tear streams down. End scene.